Good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Charles, and I'm the director of Charlotte Water, and I thank you all for coming out this evening. This is our public notification meeting regarding Charlotte Water's notice of intent regarding modifying our interbasin transfer certificate. Before I go any further, if you are an elected official, I neglected to do this last time, will you just please stand? We always like to recognize our elected officials. Thank you, and thank you for attending. You know, I'm on the staff side, and it really takes good political support in anything that you do. So thank you guys for being here. Now let me also have the panelists introduce themselves.
So Ron Hargrove, I'm one of the deputy directors at Charlotte Water.
Good evening, everyone. I think I turned it off.
Yeah, okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linwood Peel, and I'm with the North Carolina Division of Water Resources, Department of Environmental Quality, and I'm the supervisor for the Water Supply Planning Program, which oversees the interbasin transfer process.
Okay, so thank you, Ron and Linwood. So again, what is this meeting about? This meeting is to notify the public about our potential requests to transfer more water from the Catawba River to the Rocky River in the future. And so again, one thing that I know that we all have in common is the Catawba River. Charlotte Water is not asking for permission to withdraw more water from the Catawba River. This is about the transfer. We are exploring the need to increase the amount of water we transfer from the Catawba to the Rocky River Basin. Ron Hargrove in his presentation will explain and talk more about that. So what have we done to this point? There's been a preliminary analysis that suggests that a transfer of up to 30 million gallons a day, which would be less than 1% of the flow through the Catawba waterway system, could be needed. And it's not like 30 million gallons from the point approval. This is a 30-year, we have to project out 30 years what we would need as a utility, and not just Charlotte, but all utilities across North Carolina. Linwood will share with you later on that there are 130 such type transfers in the state of North Carolina. The modeling of the Catawba waterway system was developed by Duke Energy in 2006 as a part of the FERC relicensing process. And in that process, projections were made out to year 2058, and that was included, that was part of the modeling that was done. And local water supply plans for communities in North and South Carolina were included in those projections. Future growth projections for our area, for Charlotte, was also included in those forecasts. And so Charlotte Water's potential request was modeled and is within the projections that were done in the FERC relicensing process. The Catawba Waterway Management Group, and many of you have heard of that group. Many utilities, along with Duke in North and South Carolina, who all share the Catawba River. That group is currently updating the model through 2075. And Ron Hargrove will talk a little bit more about that. So we wanted to give you a feel for the Catawba Watery Management Group and the different communities that are a part of the group, a part of the modeling, a part of the projections, and all of us work together as utilities and cities on the Catawba chain. A little bit here about the lake, and you'll hear a little bit more about this later on. If you look to your far left, and this is again about the lakes and the partnerships and rainfall into the system, you've got 3.7 billion gallons of surface and groundwater inflow. And then if you look at the arrows, the little squiggly arrows on the right, you'll see natural surface evaporation is 204 million gallons a day. You've got public water supply at 111.6, industrial 0.05, you've got power, you've got agricultural and irrigation at 38.6 million gallons a day. And then at the Watery Hydro Station, you got 3.3 billion gallons a day. What this really depicts is kind of how much you've got 255 billion gallons of usable storage that's in the chain, and this shows you the effect of evaporation and also water supply, power, and agriculture. So what we're going to do is, this is the agenda. We've done introductions. Linwood Peel from North Carolina DEQ is going to do an overview. Ron Hargrove, Deputy Director, will talk specifically about the potential request, and then we'll talk about questions, then we'll take questions and or comments. Now, this is, again, our objective this evening is to capture comments and also questions. We may or may not be able to answer all questions, but your feedback will be an input into our environmental impact statement. So, you know, part of the process is to notify the public. That's what we are doing here, to receive your questions and comments, and then we take all of that information and it's input into the next step. So Linwood, if you want to come on up.
Good evening again. Tonight, I'm going to give an IBT overview, the program overview, and the process that Charlotte Water will have to take, and every water users who want to transfer water from one river basin to another river basin. First, that kind of outline what I'm going to cover is the interbasin transfer, the definition, a basic definition, and the purpose of it, the statutory requirements that the General Assembly have put in place, and then the IBT process and the considerations that the EMC makes. And it's very important for your comments to address the factors that the EMC will look at, because they would be the one to making the final determination on the interbasin transfer certificate. So it's important for your comments to direct them in the direction that you would have them to go in. First, give you the definition. IBT only works with surface water, so it's transferring surface water withdrawn from one river basin and transferring into another river basin, and surface and discharging into another, all or part of that water. Next, the purpose. The purpose, the General Assembly in 1993 established the IBT law, the statute, and they said to transfer surface water in North Carolina, they wanted to make sure there was good public policy to move water from one river basin to another. And with that said, the General Assembly has made more than 20 changes since 1993 of installing or implementing this first statute. The statutory threshold, there's three ways that the General Assembly said interbasin transfer could occur. The first one, the first thing they established is no person can transfer water without obtaining a certificate through the Environmental Management Commission. That's the governing board that oversees this process. First, initiate a transfer of 2 million gallons of water any one day, calculated, daily average of the calendar month, or not exceed a peaking factor of 3 million gallons in any one day. And generally, that's which most users or water systems have occur first. The second, increase the amount of an existing transfer, whether that's a grandfather or a certificate amount, 25%. And in the past, of the 9 certificates we have, none of them entered in number 2. Number 3 is what Charlotte and one other system so far have done in the state of North Carolina, increase the existing transfer of water from one river basin, the amount that was approved by the EMC in their particular case was 2002. Next, to kind of sticking with the definition of interbasin transfer, kind of give you a visual of the transfer. And transfer is the withdrawal minus the return, and it's the net transfer, not the gross. In this particular case, example A, the actual withdrawal there is 10 MGD, but the town itself, or the system itself, or the service area, denoted in green, they withdraw 10, but they use 2 in the source basin side and 3 in the receiving, and then they discharge 5. In this case, the IBT certificate would be considered 8 MGD in this case, or unit of 8. The second one, B, and all systems are different. In this case, the system was built on a ridge line. It's denoting that. The source B is a system that's totally in another basin, the receiving basins, and they're withdrawing 10, but they're discharging through a wastewater treatment plant, for instance, 5, but they're using 5 within their town, whether it's consumptive, such as septic systems, it could be discharge, it could be lawn watering, and so forth. So in this case, it would be 10 minus 5, which is 5 MGD in this case. Next, I want to kind of mention the basin map itself. This map was developed by the General Assembly back in 1993, and the map roughly shows the hydrologic unit code, which we call HUC. You hear us say HUC 8. And in this case, the major basin represents the total colors. You see the yellows, the browns, the blues, and so forth. That's the major basin. But if you look at the secondary number, for instance, the Cape Fear, you see Hall River, Deep River, those are the sub-basin. Regardless if it's a major basin or sub-basin, which the major is 18 and the sub is 38, you still have to get an interbasin transfer certificate when you meet the thresholds, the 3 that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to go back one second. And one of the things I wanted to say, I mentioned the hydrologic unit code of the basins. Some of these they was all drawn by the General Assembly, and some of them are very closely related to the HUC code number, but some of them was politically drawn as well. Very small amount there. Next, I would like to give you an overview of the water transfer in North Carolina, and what you heard Ms. Angela Charles mention earlier was that over 130 public systems have surface water transfers. It's at some level, and in the local water supply planning program that was established in 1989, we're required to look at surface water transfers. And in the case, out of 550 some systems, we had 130 public water systems that had some form of surface water. 80% of those are less than 1 MGD. And out of those 130, since the program has started in 1993, we only have 9 IBT certificates, and I'll go through those really briefly a little bit later. And as I mentioned earlier, it was only one previous IBT certificate modification, and that was the town of Cary. And grandfather allowance, or now what we use the term is pre-existing condition. Remember, a lot of systems which was rightfully done, was built on ridge lines. So if you're built on a ridge line, as I showed the example, part of your system can be in one basin and another part in another basin. So that's automatically transferred when you transfer water through a distribution system or any type of mechanical part of your water system. And I've been talking about local water supply plan and water systems, but it's also, this applies to any water user in the state of North Carolina who transfer water. Even if it's agriculture or a power company, you have to go through this certification process as well. And I think it's 7 or 8 systems that is between 1 and 2 MGD that we're monitoring before they go over the 2 MGD threshold. Okay, I wanted the 9 transfers that I mentioned is next, and the Piedmont Mineral was I guess one of the first documented ones through the EMC, and that was before the statute was actually in place. That was from the Deep River to the Hall and Yadkin River, and they 30.5 MGD. And then Charlotte, 2002, as I mentioned earlier, there's 33 from the Catawba to the Rocky. City of Concord, Kannapolis, 2007, they have 10 MGD from the Catawba to the Rocky, and also from the Yadkin to the Rocky as well. Greenville Utilities, and I mentioned earlier, what is important is that since 1993, the General Assembly have made 20+ changes to the statute. But the last 4 or 5 years, there have been draft bills, maybe 2 a year, but haven't been implemented or signed by both the House and the Senate. The point I'm making that the General Assembly look at IBT more than any other statute that's under my 13 different statewide programs. So I wanted you to know that it's important to them as well. And then Greenville Utilities, they actually had a modification in the process because they went from groundwater because of depleting of the Central Coastal Plain to surface water. Brunswick County went under another modification where they were a coastal system. Then, of course, Town of Care, Apex, this is their second one, modification. The original one, I want to say, was 1989, if I'm not mistaken. And then Kerr Lake, that's a core project, so they had a change in the statute as well. And then, of course, the most recent two is Union County and the town of Wingate and Pender County, both in there. So in 30-year was the 30-year anniversary last year, 2023, from 1993, only 9 certificates in the state has been issued, as much as they make changes. And this is important. The interbasin transfer process, the standard process here would show that it was required to have public meetings, notice of intent. Everyone have to do notice of intent, but then public meetings and so forth. But the modification V, which is 215.22 ALV, the modification process typically do not require public meetings, but in the case of Charlotte, they are required through the North Carolina-South Carolina Settlement Agreement. And in their case, they are doing this as this is one of 7 public meetings that they're having here. And another thing, conversation we had tonight and the previous one, a lot of people was asking, well, where's the environmental document? The environmental document will be worked on after this process has started. So it hasn't started yet, and you don't have a lot of, I guess, environmental documents to review because they haven't done it yet. They're just notifying this to the public. So I think it's important for us to know that. But the next steps, once we get the applicant, who is Charlotte Water, submits a draft environmental impact statement because they're required through the settlement agreement, North Carolina-South Carolina Settlement Agreement, there will be an iteration of process. This doesn't happen overnight. We have had just the environmental documentation, most of them take 2 to 3 years just to get that, because when they submit it to us, when I mean I'm talking about the department and all the different agencies have to go through and make sure it answers all the questions. Then the EMC has to also, look at it, and we have to make sure it's adequate. So the department will provide a record of decision, and then the EMC will have to do the same process because they have to issue this certificate, not the staff at Division of Water Resources or DEQ. But then the final stage, EMC will issue the final determination for the certificate. And one of the things I do want to stress that what the EMC considers, I'm going to give you the 9 factors, but the EMC, keep in mind the EMC may grant a petition in whole or in part, or just flat out deny it, or make required mitigation measures to minimize detrimental effects, whether it's the source basin or the receiving basin. And as I said, the EMC, your questions and comments should fall under these categories next. So please, really consider your comments to fall under one of these, because that's how the statute, the General Assembly requires them to make a decision based on, number one, is it necessary? Is it reasonable? And the proposed uses of the transfer. They want to make sure the purpose and need for this is good, sound policy. And then present or reasonable foreseeable detriment effects to the source basin. Is anything going to occur in the source basin that cause detrimental harm to users downstream, aquatic life, ecology, and so forth? Cumulative effect on the source basin. They want to make sure, because in the process of doing this and modeling, they have to look at not only Charlotte water demands, but we have to look at everyone in the source basin's demand and ensure that this won't be detrimental to current and future users within that basin. Present and reasonable foreseeable benefit and detrimental effects on the receiving basin. You want to make sure that you're not putting things in the receiving basin, or you're impacting the receiving basin to cause issues there as well. And the availability of reasonable alternatives. A conversation we had tonight, the person mentioned about alternatives. That's the part of the environmental documentation, and that's why this meeting seemed almost premature, because they haven't looked at all the alternatives yet, because you're not supposed to based on the way the statute is written. And then the use of impounded storage capacity. In this case, they use Duke Energy Lake, and they already have the ability to withdraw from there, but that's a part of the comments should be tailored to purpose of water storage allocation. This doesn't apply to the Army Corps of Engineers, but for there's 4 Corps lakes in North Carolina that it does apply to. Whether the service area of the applicant is within both the source and the receiving basin, that's important. In this case, Charlotte is. Any other factors, and the number 9, I said, it's a catch-all for the EMC. If your comments can fall on the 9 and they can tie it to the statutes, that would be a benefit as well. With that, this is the last one, then I'm going to wrap it up. But specific conditions required by statute. The statute clearly states that any applicant, but in the case of Charlotte Water, they have to provide us a water conservation plan on how they're going to use the water and how they can conserve water when time, but also a drought management plan, they have to do it, and a compliance, all the 9 certificates have to do a compliance and monitoring plan, and we monitor how they use the water, and if they're in their 30-year projections, and the IBTs look at 30 years out to ensure that they're following that process. Then, of course, quarterly monitoring reports to the division for us to provide updates to the Environmental Management Commission and at certain times when we give the updates to them. And they will always have, the EMC will always have the ability to reopen, amend, and modify if something changed, within that application. And one of the things is very distinct in the statute: no selling of transfer water to anyone that's not on that application. So, for instance, a system can't get a certificate and then start selling water to another system if they're not a part of that whole study. And as I said, EMC may pose additional conditions as they see fit. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angela, and I'm here for any questions that you may have about the process.
Okay, thank you, Linwood. And next we'll have Ron Hargrove, Deputy Director, and he will discuss specifically Charlotte Water's request.
So good evening. Thank you for your interest in this topic. I'll share a little bit about Charlotte Water. What is an IBT? I know you've just heard it, but I'm going to paint the picture in Charlotte Water's daily usages terms, why an IBT modification is needed now, what the IBT modification process and schedule looks like, what alternatives are being considered, and then Angela will come back up and share how you can continue to participate in the process, and then we'll have questions. So about Charlotte Water, our service area includes all of Mecklenburg County. We have connections with surrounding counties for both water and sewer in most cases. And we serve customers in both the Catawba and the Rocky River Basin. The area in blue and a little bit in green are the Rocky River portion of Mecklenburg County. It consists of about 31% of Mecklenburg County. We're a large public wastewater utility in both Carolinas. The population in Mecklenburg County is a little over 1.1 million that is served mostly by Charlotte Water. We like to consider ourselves proactive planners. In 2002, we made the first IBT certification request through this EMC process that Linwood described, and that was for a 30-year planning window. And so in 2002, we got that initial 33 million gallon a day certificate, and that 33 million gallons is measured on a peak day basis. So the single day of the year, the most water we transferred from the Catawba to the Rocky River, that's how that's measured under the current certificate. We're approaching that 30-year mark. We're within the horizon that we need to be planning about what happens for the next 30 years. We can't wait till that limit's exceeded because that requires other regulatory hurdles that we would have to jump through. So proactively, we're trying to plan for what occurs next. We have been long-term partners. We're a founding member along with other utilities with the Catawba Water Management Group, as well as other stakeholders. We have also been involved through the Catawba Watery Drought Monitoring Advisory Group. So whenever there's a drought anywhere in the basin, everybody participates in making calls for conservation depending on the low inflow protocol. So we're partnered through several avenues with other utilities, like-minded folks about preserving the water resources for the entire basin. So what is an interbasin transfer? I know Linwood showed you this graphic. This is Charlotte Water's numbers. So this shows you our total withdrawal out of the Catawba River from our two intakes. Average day is 117 million gallons per day. Some of that water is consumed in the Catawba Basin, so about 22 million. And then 75 million comes back through our wastewater treatment facilities back to the Catawba Basin. So none of that water is considered a transfer. What is considered a transfer is the water that's either consumed or discharged across the ridgeline into the Rocky River Basin. So on an average day, about 20 million gallons of our withdrawal is consumed or discharged, and thus is a transfer. How that transfer occurs is through our utility system. There's no direct tie from the Catawba to the Rocky River except through the Charlotte Water system. We withdraw water in one of the two reservoirs. We treat it, we pump it out to our customers. They use it for all of their purposes. Some of that water gets discharged back to us, and we collect it and treat it at our wastewater treatment plants. And in 4 out of 5 cases, all of that water makes it back to a stream in the Catawba River Basin. Again, the Mecklenburg County map, you'll see the blue dots are where we have intakes on the Catawba, one in Lake Norman, one in Mountain Island Lake. The blue squares are where we have water treatment plants that treat the water to drinking water quality, and then we pump it out throughout our system. Some of that water gets pumped across the ridge into the Rocky River Basin and into these particular subbasins that you see in the darker color there. Our wastewater treatment facilities are in the orange color, so 4 of those are in the Catawba Basin, and that water goes back to the Catawba River at some point. There are 2 plants. One's a major plant, the Mallard Creek Wastewater Treatment Facility right on the eastern border of Mecklenburg County and Cabarrus County is where the wastewater is discharged into a tributary of Rocky River. And then we also have agreements with the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County to treat a portion of the wastewater generated in the Rocky River Basin. So they treat that at their Rocky River Regional wastewater treatment plant. We do have a very small package plant, it's like 100,000 gallons a day, to serve a subdivision at the far southeast portion of the county that would be also considered an interbasin transfer. Why do we need IBT now? Again, that 2002 certification limit is 33 million gallons. That's depicted by the red dashed line on the graph. The blue trend line that you see there is what our average, or what our actual peak days have been since 2005. In 2023, we had a peak day of 26 million gallons per day. In 2022, we had a peak day of 28 million gallons per day. So we're right at that 80% level of our current certification. And in the utility business, once you get to 80% of capacity, it's time to start planning. Sometimes the regulations require you to start planning and doing study work to determine if you need a capacity increase. Once you hit 90%, you should be implementing that next phase of whatever it is for you to gain more capacity to serve your customers in your community. So based upon population projections, growth projections, we think our current 33 MGD peak day certificate could be exceeded in the 2028 to 2030 range. The trend line you see in gray is our average day. I mentioned that we have an average transfer of about 20 million gallons, and so that's what's depicted in the gray line, and you can see that we projected out 30 years for both of those as to where we could be, depending on how the trends develop. What's the process for our modification and schedule? We are only on step 2 of at least 12. It's probably going to be more than that. We have issued a notice of intent that, hey, we think we may need a modification. And so we've notified the state, and we've notified the public through letters, emails, and public meetings. And we're hosting, this is the 6th of 7 public meetings that we're holding, and then we'll have a 30-day comment period that will end on August 30th. We'll take all those comments and we will then start a stakeholder engagement process. We are looking for various interests across the basin to help us determine what alternatives that we should consider that goes into our environmental document. We do have to develop an alternatives analysis, an environmental impact statement. All that information then gets turned over to folks like Linwood and his staff for them to write an environmental document that then gets vetted through the process. We're asking the EMC to hold a public hearing about the adequacy of that environmental document. If they find it's not adequate, that goes back to the drawing board, and we'll have to revamp whatever alternatives or whatever feedback that the EMC wants us to address. We do want them to approve that adequacy, and they will hold a public hearing. So that will be another public input point in time through the process. Once all that EIS is determined to be adequate, this last bullet down here is where we would officially make a formal request for additional transfer. I know there's numbers been thrown out there. They are all preliminary, and I think the state would tell you that the initial numbers that utilities have promoted to start with have all changed over time as they've gotten into their alternatives analysis. That's really the intent of the alternatives, is to determine if you need, how much water you do need, and are there alternatives or mitigating factors that could offset that or reduce it or completely eliminate it. Once we've submitted our formal request, it's totally in the EMC's hands. They will look over the information, they will make their determination, and then they will hold a public hearing about their draft determination. Once the input is received from the public, they will then issue their final determination on the IBT. Here's just a straw man schedule. This is likely not achievable with the timeline laid out here, but we do know certain dates in this, like we issued the spring notice of intent this past spring. We are holding the public notice meetings currently. And this fall, we will start our stakeholder engagement process. We think by the end of the year, first of next year, we may have the alternatives that go into the analysis, that portion of the process to start, where we're looking at the alternatives. The stakeholders will still be engaged through that process, and once we get to a final recommendation, those stakeholders will be informed about where those alternatives led Charlotte Water down the road. The draft will then be sent to DEQ. They will develop the environmental document, and that will go to the EMC to hold a public hearing about adequacy. Once that determination is made, then we submit our proposed IBT request formally to the EMC. Then they hold their public hearing once they've made a determination. And then once the public comments are received, if there's no more questions to answer, that's when the final determination would be made by the EMC. So these are the areas where the public can be engaged and comment through our process that's been laid out. We did try to notify affected parties across the basin in both the source and the receiving basin. The orange colored area there is the source basin, the Catawba, from its headwaters all the way down to where it has confluence below Columbia. And then on the receiving side from the Rocky River all the way down to the upper PD and lower PD areas in South Carolina. We notified units of local government, public water supply systems, IBT, certificate holders, the folks on the North Carolina, South Carolina Settlement Agreement notification list, NGOs, nonprofits, COGS, tribal governments, industries that had intakes along the Catawba system were notified. What preliminary alternatives are being considered? So before we started down the path of making a modification request, we did look at a few alternatives to see if they were even achievable. Actionable is the term we like to use. We did look at how we could pump wastewater back to the Catawba Basin, what the cost of that would be and what the feasibility of that would be. We looked at water reuse options. How can we use treated effluent at our Mallard Creek facility instead of discharging it to the creek, treat it to higher standards and use that water for non-potable uses like irrigation or cooling tower uses, things that wouldn't be for human consumption. That offsets the amount of potable water that would be a transfer otherwise. We look for new sources in the Yadkin Basin, much like Union County has done. Is there a way we could tap somewhere along the Yadkin in one of the reservoirs, pipe out that water across a couple of counties and treat it for distribution in the Rocky River Basin? And then we also looked at increasing the IBT through modification. Things that are considered in alternatives, I know Linwood gave you a list of things, but capital cost, schedule, O&M cost, the benefits and risks, environmental factors, and the construction feasibility are all factors that are considered during an alternatives analysis. Again, we're looking for actionable alternatives to be raised so that they can be scoped in our environmental document process, in our alternatives analysis, and that will be further refined through the stakeholder engagement process as well as the work that will go into developing the environmental impact statement. So I'll turn it back over to Angela here to close us out.
Okay, thank you, Ron. So how can you comment and participate in this process? Number one, all of you all are participating now by attending one of our public meetings, a public meeting tonight. You can learn more by visiting charlottewateribt.org, On this website, you will see videos from previous meetings that we've had. You can see all of the materials, this presentation, and questions and comments that have been made in our public meetings are also listed on the website. So there is an effort to be as transparent as possible. You can also email. We have someone monitoring this email address. It is ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. Again, that's ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. We have received many emails to this email address, and so you can email us directly, or again, you can go to charlottewateribt.org. That's the repository, the electronic place you can go to for all documents and comments and recordings and records of these public meetings. You can also comment, as Ron stated, on the draft EIS during the public hearing for adequacy by the EMC. So again, there's an opportunity to comment on the draft EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, by the EMC, the public hearing as related to that. You can also comment again during the EMC hearing on the draft IBT determination. So again, you can comment on the draft IBT determination at the EMC. And finally, we will be having stakeholder engagement workshops along with public notification and input and outreach. So let's talk a little bit about the stakeholder workshops. The goal of these workshops is through meaningful stakeholder engagement. We want to identify actionable, that's the word that Ron used, actionable alternatives to modifying the IBT, and evaluate the alternatives within the scope of the EIS. And so we're looking for a cross-section of stakeholders to represent key and diverse interests, and stakeholders will have the ability to shape alternatives that will be considered. So again, we're looking for meaningful stakeholder engagement. Logistics, we plan on having the stakeholder workshops fall of 2024. Professional facilitation, we will not be facilitating ourselves. When I say ourselves, with staff, we're going to have professional facilitators come in and facilitate the stakeholder workshops. There will be multiple workshops, and the meeting format will be in person with virtual options. So we don't want it to be such that someone feels like they've got to drive to our location. We're still working on these. We don't have all details outlined, but we do have a plan for more meaningful engagement where some of the technical information can be reviewed, and again, to help shape alternatives that can be considered. Along, happening in parallel, there will be public outreach and engagement that will occur parallel with workshops. And so if you really have an interest in it, we're going to live stream the stakeholder workshops. So like this meeting tonight is live stream, right? So you can be in a whole nother state looking at this meeting right now because it is being live streamed. We're going to do the same thing with the stakeholder workshops so that the general public can be a part of that and listen to folks who really have an in-depth interest in this. And again, the latest information will be shared on the IBT website. And I do want to stress charlottewateribt.org. That is the place where we are housing everything as related to this process. Okay, public meetings. So this is meeting number 6. And again, I thank the folks in this part of the state. Meeting number 1 was in Hickory. This is meeting number 6. Hickory, Morganton area. Thanks to Morganton for hosting us this evening in this wonderful facility. We do have one more meeting, and we have had some folks in South Carolina to drive to meetings, not necessarily in their area. And so you are welcome to meeting number 7. It is in Rock Hill, and that'll be the last meeting, July the 29th, at Dutchman Creek Middle School. And that one will be in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So questions or comments about our potential request to transfer more from the Catawba River to the Rocky River in the future. This meeting, by it being live streamed, and we do want to have a recording, we do ask that if you have any questions, that you really line up at the 2 mics if you have any questions or comments, so that we can hear it, and we'll have the recording via the live stream, and we'll just, alternate between the mics. And what I will say to you all is, thank you for your engagement. This is very important. And we do appreciate your interest and you all taking the time to be here. Certainly, we thank the elected officials, and we will take a moment if you want to line up to the 2, and I will start with the gentleman on my left and your right. We have the 2 panelists up here queued up. Again, we may not be able to answer all questions. Also, comments will be recorded. So if you have something already written and that you want to read, and also have it submitted and scanned on our website, we can also take your written comments. Also, if you will identify yourself when you speak for the record, we would appreciate it. Sir.
My name is Don Newton. I'm a resident of Caldwell County in Granite Falls and a native North Carolinian. I wish you all good health, and speaking for the Foothill people, we wish the people of Charlotte the water that they need, and we wish them a long, healthy life. Now, what could happen to the local environment if Charlotte takes 66 million gallons of water per day out of the Catawba River? What would happen to wildlife? Food, jobs, growth, our economy, tourism. We are the executive producers of the North Carolina Wild Concert at Boy Hill Civic Center, August the 10th at 7 o'clock. We spent 5 years filming the wilderness of North Carolina, the wildlife, and the refuges and those things. And we're doing a live concert in sync with that film. And I'm the executive producer of that. And I will be the producer of the documentary about this process. Impact of the local environment and wildlife. Lower water levels in rivers and lakes, significant water extraction can reduce the water levels in local rivers, lakes, and reservoirs, and lead to habitat loss for aquatic species and decreased water quality. Alter ecosystems. The reduced water flow can disrupt the natural balance of ecosystems, affecting fish population, aquatic plants, and wildlife, and depend on these waters for resources. Increased pollution. Lower water levels can concentrate pollutants, affecting the health of both aquatic life, animals, and humans. Irrigation challenges. Farmers rely on local water sources for irrigation, may face water shortages leading to reduced crop yields and potential financial loss. Soil health. Insufficient water can affect soil moisture levels, leading to soil degradation and reduced fertility over time. Agriculture. Water shortages can negatively impact jobs in agriculture sector due to decreased crop productions and potential layoffs. Fishing industry. I've met with marinas, and they say the water's already too low, affecting their business. Tourism, recreation. Low water levels in lakes and rivers can impact tourism and recreational activities like boating, fishing, and swimming, potentially leading to job losses in these sectors. The impact on growth. We have our own growth plans. I'm a member of the Lenore Chamber of Commerce and working with business plans, and like Hickory, we have our plans to grow jobs too. And so, overall economic growth of the region could be stunted due to limitations on water-intensive industries and potential for increased costs associated with water scarcity. Migration measures. To migrate these impacts, Charlotte could invest in water conservation measures, promote efficient water use, and explore alternative water sources, as you said you were going to do. However, that was not seen in this presentation. And so we have released this press release. And what we do here, everybody in the foothills I talk to as a citizen agrees with Hickory, who has said no. So therefore, we're requesting that we transfer 66 million gallons a day from the Rocky River Basin into the Catawba Valley so we can have some concerns for our growth.
Also, Don, can you email us your comments? Yeah, sure. If you make sure.
Is that on the paper you folks gave us?
Yes, sir. I'd like to make sure we have that for the record.
Personal, folks.
Yeah, if
That's
you
the way
will.
Christians do around God.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Roy Cook, and I'm from Hildebrand. What happens if there's a drought that goes on? Do we have the right to refuse our water going down to Charlotte? That's one of my questions. Getting water from here lessens the cost for Charlotte to expand. Having been a builder, it's always been, if your subdivision you want is going to cost us, fire department, water delivery, sewer lines, pavement, you have to build that into the cost of your subdivision. Are your subdivision builders being hit with a portion of that cost? Another question I have, who is representing us here tonight? I see you three folks up there, and I'm glad to see you here, and there is no animus from any of us to you, but who is representing us?
Department of Environmental Quality and the Interbasin transfer process represents the citizens of North Carolina and the environment.
Okay, and I've never heard that term used before, so I don't know who they are. I'm asking about, is there a human being that I can send an email to or a phone call to when I have a concern?
Yes, and I get a lot of telephone calls almost every day. Yes, yes. If you need my card, please do so.
Okay.
And I'll let you finish.
Appreciate it. Another question I have is, will this water be being transferred through pipes? Or is it going underground? Or how is it going from one location to another location? And the reason that I ask for is there are other states where high voltage transmission lines going through are putting farmers out of business because they want the right to take over that land and put in. I don't want to see any of our neighbors lose property because of some water line going through. My next concern is how much water usage transferred from what we're using now that was actually created by Duke Energy, how much of that water usage needs to be going elsewhere before Duke Energy says, sorry, folks, we're going to have to triple your electrical rates. For us, that's a concern. The questions that are coming up here, ultimately, can this be settled by a referendum, meaning one vote, one person, we all collectively get to put our pen to paper and say yay or nay? Or is this something that's going to be decided by a room full of people who will represent us on a scale of 1 to 100,000 and tell us after the fact, sorry, this is what's going to happen? One of my forethoughts, 30 years from now, many of us won't be here to address any of this. Will our grandchildren be proud of us or hurt by us? That's something that we all need to take into account. How much pollution is entering the systems? Is anybody monitoring that on an ongoing basis? I would hate to see water taken from us that is in really good, pristine condition and get transferred into where somebody is adding, to use an old term, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, or PVCs. I don't want our good water getting blended into where somebody else is being allowed to because of poor management in their zone. Is any of this water going to be transferred out of state? Is there any money involved from the recipients or the transferors? And how do we get to see the live streaming of this evening?
Okay, you get to see the live streaming on charlottewaterIBT.org, so it'll be a recording of that. I'm glad you asked that question. You also have a series of questions. If you could email us at that site, we'd love to have those.
I'd be glad to.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica Howells, and I have been living here in Burke County for 34 years and I had just a couple of questions. One was, I wondered if you could please let us know the distinction between withdrawal versus transfer of the water.
You have to turn it on.
How about now? How about now?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
So why we pick on those words, you know, Charlotte community, just like Hickory, Morganton, is going to have water withdrawals on a daily basis to meet the community's demands. In our case, we have a portion of our service area that's across the ridgeline that would be a transfer because it doesn't come back to the Catawba. In the next 30 years, we expect our demands to grow system-wide. And so there will be more water withdrawal due to growth. All of that is not occurring just in the transfer area. A portion will. That's why we like to try and distinguish between what's being withdrawn versus what's being transferred. We have a certificate for the amount that's being transferred. The water withdrawal in our capacities is something that is in a whole different process that's been approved by FERC for our intakes and how much capacity we have to withdraw for really the foreseeable future. And so that's the distinguishing point between a water withdrawal and a transfer.
So that kind of speaks to my next point or question, I guess. So actually, you are currently withdrawing 117 million gallons per day, correct?
Correct.
And so that really, when we talk about increasing from 33 million gallons per day to 63 million gallons per day, the amount that's transferred, I guess, then we're really talking about doubling that, possibly, or more.
No, we're,
200 and...
in 30 years,
30 years.
I don't have the number of what our water demand growth will be at that point. That we do studies.
Right.
One thing that I probably didn't mention as much as I did the last time, as a member of the Catawba Water Management Group, We provide that group our water supply plan, which is a 50-year plan. It's required by the state, the DWR staff. Us, along with every other utility in North Carolina, provides that to the state. The Catawba Water Water Management Group was charged through the North Carolina-South Carolina Supreme Court settlement with keeping a water supply master plan. It basically models the Catawba Wateree system from the headwaters all the way through Lake Wateree, and it determines water demand and sustainability over a 50-year period. And so that our demands, along with all the other partners on the Catawba Wateree, are in that model.
Yeah, and so you're looking at flow rates, and when you're talking about modeling, but
Right.
not really taking into consideration the fact that in actuality the majority of the water will be returned to the Catawba, basically cleaned up as wastewater.
Correct.
And we all know how that system, I know how that system works through an NPDES permit. It will be, there's a certain acceptable amount of pollution that
That's
will
correct.
be. So these are very pristine waters here in Burke County in the Catawba. We're close to the headwaters.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
we value that. We value that. And I just want to make that point. That
Thank you.
we don't want that. We don't want to have our water used and returned as wastewater, So that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Tammy Steyer, and I'm the licensing project manager for Duke Energy's Catawba Wateree hydroelectric project. And I'm going to read a statement that we have provided at other of your IBT meetings. So for consistency's sake, I'm going to read this. I apologize for reading, but
That's fine.
I want to make sure we're consistent, and
Yes.
I'll also email these to you when
Thank
we're
you,
done.
Tammy. Thank you.
Okay, so again, my name is Tammy Steyer, and I'm the licensing project manager for Duke Energy's Catawba Wateree Hydro Project. Duke Energy is also a very active member of the Catawba Wateree Water Management Group. Our general manager of water strategy, hydro licensing, and lake services, who's Jeff Lineberger, is the vice chair of the Catawba Wateree Water Management Group. And the Water Management Group has a lot of further discussions planned regarding interbasin transfers, not just Charlotte Water, IBT, and in-basin water demand growth, and I expect more information from the Water Management Group will be forthcoming. So my comments tonight are on behalf of Duke Energy.
Okay.
So water and electricity are essential. As the impounder of the 11-lake Catawba Wateree Hydro Project, Duke Energy certainly has a keen interest in how our shared water supply is used, and that goes for all the uses and all communities that use it. It takes a lot of water to make electricity, and likewise, a lot of electricity to make and deliver water. A growing region can't continue to grow without an affordable, reliable, and sustainable supply of both water and electricity, and I don't see that changing. More stakeholder engagement is needed. Duke Energy is committed to working with the Catawba Wateree Water Management Group and others to conserve and manage the shared water supply. We are asking Charlotte Water to use its creativity and its demonstrated leadership to further enhance the stakeholder engagement process to find the most sustainable, affordable, and reliable solutions to meet the growing water needs. So what is ideal? In an ideal world, there would be no interbasin transfers. Water would stay in the river basin in which it falls as rain. Supply and demand are easy to understand in an ideal world. But from a practical reality, this is not an ideal world. Population centers and political boundaries don't follow river basin boundaries. In fact, all 14 counties in which the lake system is located have at least 2 defined river basins in them. That means supporting growth is likely to require interbasin transfers in many locations. This isn't just a Charlotte issue. So let's take a breath and work together. I would like to encourage all stakeholders to take a deep breath, slow down, roll up your sleeves, and let's work together. Charlotte Water has raised its hand here to say it's time to start a serious discussion about ways to meet water needs for growth in the eastern part of Mecklenburg County. I expect it will be at least a year or even 2 and maybe 3 before they will have the completed options analysis and be ready to propose anything to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Now is the time for meaningful, fact-based conversation to help shape the analysis for the good of the entire river basin. The stakeholders that depend on the water supply are the best equipped to come up with the solutions based on sound science. Duke Energy is ready, willing, and able to participate in any balanced and collaborative stakeholder engagement process. Rewards can be great for an engaged process. In closing, I want to challenge us all to focus on having an awesome input process. Let's talk about our interests and concerns, not lead with harsh positions. With open mind and a collaborative best effort, I know we can find the best solutions. As Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. That was Duke Energy's theme 20 years ago when we worked with 85 stakeholder organizations to craft the comprehensive relicensing agreement for the Catawba Water Rehydro project. People told us then and in 2003 that we would never get to a signed agreement. Well, 3 years and many, many meetings later, we did. And the CRA was signed by 70 of the 85 organizations, including 27 local governments. We owe it to each other to build that kind of continued partnership for this river and the lake system that we all share. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. My name's Neil Pitts. I'm a Burke County resident of 70 years. I've lived right beside that river all of my 70 years. Over this time, I cross Huffman Bridge, usually weekly. I've watched that river dry up. When I was a little boy, we rented a boat from Henry Deal for $3 and take that boat and fish all day, and the water was up to the top of the bank. Go look at it now. It's simply not there. I don't have a big long speech for you, but I'm telling you, I duck hunted down there. I've got friends. I've got one with me. We duck hunted down there. You go down there now, you'd be lucky if you've seen a duck. But it hadn't been 25 years ago, you could go down there and see 500 ducks before dinner. There's only so much land, and there's only so much water. I've watched that river and you talk about drought. When there's a drought here, it's been 15 or so years ago we had a bad drought. They were riding four-wheelers across that river at Huffman Bridge. Like I said, I live there. I've watched that river dissipate until, put it in a nutshell, there's just not enough water to oblige you. And thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Neil.
Good evening, I'm Mark Fatrone. I've been living here in Morganton since 1994. As a child growing up in Florida, I got to watch the Everglades be drained by these types of transfers until it doesn't look like the same place that it was. The environmental impact there is great. Besides, transfers and water, the other word that I've heard tonight spoken often is growth. And I question, why do we have to provide this growth so that folks from states that are too dry can move here and further congest the area and further draw from a finite amount of natural resources? The folks of Texas, the folks of Arizona, the folks of West, down in South California are moving here in droves. You already can't navigate through the Charlotte area without huge amounts of traffic. And the question for Charlotte is, why are you providing, why in the alternative measures is a check on growth not considered a reasonable request? North Carolina is a beautiful state, and the reasons people want to live here are going to be deteriorated. If you go down to those areas of unchecked growth in South Florida, what you see is a sprawling wasteland of concrete with all the problems that brings. In just alone where I grew up, when we would go out of the back door, it was at the Florida Turnpike, and past that was the Everglades. Now the Everglades are about 20 miles west of there and don't look like they did when I was a kid. And I'm 48 as of this May, and in that time period that I've been alive, I've seen, like our friend here said, this area continually degrade in natural resources. The counts of mayflies, the counts of stoneflies, the counts of caddisflies, and the EPTs being a very good indicator of water quality continue to fall. Even in places like the Henry River, where those were the most pristine waters in the state, we're starting to see an impact. So the impacts are already occurring at the current amount of withdrawal. Like you said, 2022, you had 28 million, 2023, 26 million. What's that going to look like at 54 million? What's that going to look like at 60 million? That's what you have to think of today for 30 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank
Yes,
you. My name is Larry Davis. I live on Lake Roadhis. I've been here 17 years. Actually, I moved here to get away from Charlotte. And I purchased the old Castle Bridge Marina about 4 years ago, and we brought it back from death. It had been closed for about 20 years or more. And so we're just a small family-owned marina that we've seen quite a bit of changes, mostly here lately. Let me read you something I've pulled up. You can Google Lake Roadhis on the World Wide Web. It says, the natural beauty around Lake Roadhis is breathtaking. Duke Power is preserved over 20 miles. Sorry, I just want to read you. Residents and visitors enjoy the 90 miles of shoreline and 3,000 acres of crystal blue water in the summer months. And residents enjoy having the same water level year-round as Lake Roadhis water level remains constant. Well, if anybody's been down on Lake Roadhis in the last few years, we know that's BS. And you say in your little flyer here, y'all monitor the water and so forth, and how many feet down do you think the water is right now? What do you think the water level is? Since you guys are supposed to know all this. I'll tell you, it's down 3.5 feet right now. 2 days ago, it was down 4 feet and 11 inches. Is that constant? No, no. And you can call this IBT or ITB or whatever. You know, you can put a skirt and lipstick on a pig, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig. So I consider what you guys are wanting to do to us up here to sustain your growth is taken away from us. And I consider that pure greed. And I don't know about you on the same board up here as these folks. Do you get a paycheck from Charlotte Water? Well, yes, I just don't understand why you sound so proactive for this process to go through. And you do sound proactive. So I thank you for your time, and I just want you folks to keep leave our water alone. You figure out another way, but leave our water alone. If you're going to cause my marina, to be a downfall, and we don't want that to happen. I bought this place for my grandkids to have something to do, and I've got boats that's 3 inches away from sitting on the ground right now. And if you can't double your water intake just for your own satisfaction, then it's going to be devastating to us. Now, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Steve Ivester. I live in Hickory. I graduated from Morganton High School. After high school, I went to Boston and lived until about 1980. And finally, the traffic just got too much, And now when I drive to Charlotte, I see the same thing. I wouldn't live there. I wouldn't live in Boston. I wouldn't live in Charlotte. I think Charlotte needs to figure out how to share its population growth and its industrial growth with the towns up and down the valley that need jobs. Now, you said that there was 3,000 gallons of water at the bottom of the Watery project. Well, I went today, that's on your slide, your first slide says 3,000 gallons, thereabouts. Yeah, 3,000 million, sorry.
You got it.
3,000 million.
There it is.
Well, that's maybe at Watery, but I went today to the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey and I looked at the bottom of Lake Wylie, which is really what we're more concerned about. It was a third of that. It was only 1,000 gallons per day that they were reporting over the dam. Now, you know, if you go to this 100 million gallons a day, that's going to be a 10% reduction in what goes over that dam. And you tell me that won't affect our power price, our power costs? I think it will. I was involved with this in 2002 when you tried the same thing. The decision was that Valdez couldn't get water because the water would be too low. The decision was that McGuire couldn't get water for his nuclear plant because the water would be too low. That hasn't changed. You know, the climate has gotten worse. There's been a lot of development all up and down the valley. We need the water. I don't think Charlotte needs the water. It's already too overgrown. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, sir.
Hi, I know it's been a while, but I spoke at the last one. I know you guys have had several meetings that I didn't know about since then, but the one in Hickory. Anyway, I'm gonna take it easier. I'm not gonna call Charlotte a dump or anything like that, like I did last time. This is great. I'm glad you guys have. I will compliment you because at least now you have some stats. Last time it was like you guys were giving a speech to 12-year-olds. This is interesting. But we were doing some simple math. I'm going to stick with my dredging comment that I made last time, and I simplified that for everyone. But a simple sort of Band-Aid to at least sort of see how much water we can loan you guys would be to increase the pond, increase the bucket size. Okay? We've got, by the way, I live on Lake Hickory. Just my cove alone, and we've got hundreds of coves that have been compromised. We've got dozens of coves that have disappeared. There's now, it's people's backyards. It used to be water, but it's backyard now. We have hundreds of coves, but let me focus on mine. And this has happened to them. We've lost north of 75%, almost 80% of our water depth in 30 years. And my cove, and the real problem starts not too far from where I am and then all the way into where the stream enters my cove. But anyway, that alone is 500 yards long by about 50 yards wide, but we've lost 25 feet of water. So it's all sediment now. So quick math, we have 5 feet of water left. 30 million gallons. Do you know how many acre feet that translates into? We just did some quick math, my colleague and I.
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, it's 92 acres, foot acres is what they call it, but it's 92 acres by 1 feet deep. We could come up with that in 10 seconds. We can come up with 3 times that in 10 seconds. We can come up with 5 times that in 10 seconds on our lake. Because we've lost 25 feet just in my cove. Multiply that times 100 coves. They have 3 dredging operations at least in Norman. They have 0 on Lake Hickory because they won't let us dredge. We've got Duke here. That's great, thank you. And that was a great speech. We've got environmentalists here. rip the Band-Aid off. We need to be able to dredge, and we can come up with 10 times the amount of water you're looking for. But then we'll look at it and we'll say, well, maybe you can have a couple million. But until we do that, we're certainly not going to come up with another 30 million. That's for sure. And by the way, I love the other comment. All your numbers are based on net. Net is below Charlotte. We never see that water again. We're worried about gross because we're part of the gross. It's that simple. So actually, the 30 million I just told you is a made-up number because that's headwater. We don't see it again, nor does Charlotte. It flows down into Charleston. But anyway, a couple more comments. My sister lives in Charlotte, unfortunately, because I have to visit her there every so often when she refuses to come up to see me on the lake. Anyway, they are building like crazy where she lives in East Charlotte. I've never seen anything like, I mean, they're throwing up condos, out of trucks, I've never seen anything like it. And there's dry riverbeds and dry pond beds. I wouldn't call them lake beds, but there's clearly water there. They're bulldozing them, they're filling them, and they're throwing houses up on them. Have you guys ever thought about digging any holes and collecting rainwater for yourselves, i.e. your own reservoirs as you build the place out? No, let's just keep throwing up low-income housing and condo associations. Anyway, good luck. We'll be in touch. I'll email this because apparently I have to. It's become our second jobs. We don't work around here. But anyway, no, good luck. But this is, I'm just glad you have stats because it's helpful for us to put numbers together. Thank you very much.
Sir, can you also state your name again? I do remember you from Hickory, but if you can please state your name for the record.
Philip Frugalbin. I just made that up. What do I need to give you my name?
Well, just for the record.
Okay, Jake Waite is my name. Does it really matter?
It's being recorded. So for the record, it's up to you, but we ask everyone to identify themselves.
Well, that was a made-up name too, so that's okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, sir.
Hi there. I'm Pete Wallace. Live in Morganton. Sorry, I got to follow that act.
Thank you, Pete.
Tonight was a good dissertation on the rulemaking process, the public hearings and all that. And I understand that's the world you live in. I spent part of my career living in the regulatory world. Mm-hmm. And you're checking off your credit boxes for the public hearings, the public notifications, the stock shareholder meetings. I understand that. But what concerns me is you didn't come prepared to bring the information the people in this audience are looking for. The concerns, while you gave a dissertation on the policy-making process, what concerns the people in this room is how is it going to affect the river flow? How is it going to affect the Lake James flow, especially how is it going to affect Lake James during drought conditions? And we won't go into global warming. And I'm a Excel spreadsheet type of guy. I would like to see, in my world, I want to see, wow, average lake levels of this, average withdrawals per day is this over the course of a year. During the course of a drought condition, average withdrawals are this. And if we do this water transfer from one basin to another, how does this affect the withdrawal levels from this basin, from this particular river, and this particular lake? Because that's the summary of what these people are looking for, is those numbers. And that got totally avoided tonight. So that concerns me.
Excuse me, Angela, may I answer the question? Yes, you're absolutely right. The notice of intent in this process does not, it occurs before the environmental documentation is done. And that's exactly right. Everything that you're talking about, how it's going to affect the river flows, climate change, ecology, everything has to be done but we're too early in the process to have any of that. And maybe that's my mistake. When I was giving the presentation, that's what I tried to convey, that no environmental documentation has even been started yet, and they're required by General Assembly, the statute, to just notify the public that they're going to do it. It's their intent to do something. They haven't had a chance to do that. And as the gentleman said earlier, we have to follow statutes. The General Assembly, like I said, since 1993 has changed it more than 20 times. So we have to follow the statute. And according to the statutes, this is just a notification process. This is not, and you're right, they're not prepared because they weren't supposed to be prepared to talk about the environmental documentation, just to notify the public they're going to do it. And I hope that's clear now. Is it? No.
Well,
maybe.
Yes, no, I understand the rulemaking process and I understand the sequence.
Okay.
But it doesn't address the concerns of the audience you're facing, and more homework. I mean, frankly, you guys are experts. You really know what you're talking about. I presume that you know more about water usage than I'll ever know my whole life. And there is what people are looking for is, hey, give me a gut feel. What is this going to do to our total withdrawal? And I understand that the master plan would do that, but to address the concerns of the audience, you achieved your purpose, but you didn't achieve theirs. You spoke from the standpoint of the people given a presentation to check off boxes. You didn't speak from the standpoint of the people, the audience, about the concerns they have and what they would like to have information on.
Yes. And I agree with you, but it would be premature for us to have that answer at this time. Does that make any sense now? No?
Yes, I mean, yes, I understand we're into a multi-year process.
Yeah, okay.
The regulatory process is a multi-year process.
Right.
You have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right. We're at the beginning.
But if you say, hey, this is a notification meeting, you still are capable in your expertise of bringing more information to give people either calming feeling, or else they could have concern because they're not getting it. And unfortunately, I'm afraid tonight, what you caused was concern because they didn't get it.
Yeah.
Understood.
Thank you, Pete. Yes, sir.
Yes. My name is Doug Nichols. I reside in Caldwell County in the Grace Chapel community. I was born and raised in Burke County. I live in Caldwell now. I too experienced of seeing the waters and resources in this area change tremendously since I was a child. We in this community, starting with the headwaters like in Lake James and the Limble Gorge and so forth, we've got a finite resource of water. God put the streams and Duke, of course, created the lakes there, the basins and stuff to collect that water. But there's no new streams being created. The rainfall is what God gives us. We can't increase that. You are just looking to take that water from us. I've not heard one single thing about how during your development of new businesses and growth in Charlotte of conserving water by use of certain vegetations or anything else like that to use the water resources better. I know you're talking about that you process the water within the water system and that kind of thing, but when I went to the meeting in Hickory, you only had, I think, one golf course that you had an agreement with to reuse that water, and you were talking to UNC Charlotte about using some of that water. Out of all you have in golf courses and business and industry and different things that use a large amount of water, that's the only two people that you've talked to about how to conserve water? Or have you talked to your planning boards and so forth to control your growth? Your road systems prove that you have done a terrible job with that. I did live in Iredell County at one time and decided to move back closer to Burke so I could take a different route to Charlotte because 77 is a disaster. Your solution to 77 disaster was to create a toll road that costs taxpayers additional money to use state roads. Are we going to be, in effect, we're going to be seeing probably, if you use more of our resources on the water, again, we'll see our water bills go up, we'll see our power bills go up, et cetera, much almost like a toll would for us. The projections that you had in 2002 for the 30 million gallons per day of withdrawal, it looks like to me that your projections have fell short by about 15 to 20% of the timeline that you predicted, your 30-year growth prediction, because you're asking for 30 more million gallons per day that's going to arrive about 5 years sooner than what you expected. That tells me you're not controlling your growth. I think, and as someone else said, we're at the top of the hill. None of that water is coming back to us. Mm-hmm. We're giving, we're not receiving anything. And as far as our growth, our recreation, which again, a lot of people moved here. I grew up here and love those resources. A lot of people have moved here for those resources. But as we want to be able to take advantage of what we've got so we can grow and we can still have our recreation, we can still have business and industry look at our area rather than your area, because then they generate tax base for us. When they come to Charlotte, they do not generate any tax base, they do not generate any jobs or any other benefits for our counties, and you're taking that away from us. I also would like to know if there has, I'd like to know if there's been any studies in per capita water usage in the Charlotte area, because that would also relate back to controlled growth and also water conservation. If you go out west, and I've visited out west, I don't want to move there. I love the mountains we have, but you go out there, they have vegetation. They have different things like that that uses very little water. And when you're having, again, new development or renovation of current development, look at things like that, so that they don't have sprinkler heads everywhere watering that. Conserve our resources. We don't make those resources. God gives them to us, and we've all got to conserve that, and we just can't keep giving it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, my name is Lynn Ross, and I'm a Catawba water baby. I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband and I have a farm about 20 miles south by southeast from Morganton, and we're looking to move to Morganton because we love Morganton. I taught up here for a couple of years. My question is, so we've had a water program since 2002, and I think this addresses a lot of people's concern here is, besides monitoring, I'm not talking about just monitoring, are there longitudinal studies that y'all have been doing since 2002 with the current pull that y'all are taking out in Charlotte that have any information for people looking at conservation issues? Not just monitoring. We live, our farm actually, we've got creek in the front and creek in the back. It's the headwaters of the Little Indian Creek. I've had the Catawba Land Conservancy out here looking at it. We've got all the little nice snails and fishes. I've got too many cattle that get in the creek, but that's another issue. They need to be reined in with fences. But anyway, so that's one of my things right now. What kind of information do y'all have that y'all can give us now that can increase the trust level that you guys really know what you're doing and that you are properly monitoring and considering such things. You're getting a lot of information from people here telling you now about the lakes. I could tell you all kinds of stuff that I've seen on my farm over the years. I am one of those people that believes in climate change, and I've got farmers 80 years old that agree with me where I live. I see more and more people are putting they're going down and dipping in the creeks and putting in pumps and bringing water into the fields. We've had severe drought on our farm. We've been there 30 years. We've had severe drought there twice. And I mean, we have rainwater catchment and do all that kind of stuff, so we were okay. But anyway, so that's one of my things. I really, really want to see a rigorous program of not monitoring, but study. I know I did leave and go to Texas. I was out there and got a couple of degrees, and I've seen the devastation of growth and planning. I have seen whole riverbeds taken out with concrete put in for a bunch of houses, and we don't have water for it. Totally devastated the area. But anyway, that's what I want to hear.
Hi, my name is Julie Dickinson, and I'm a resident of Burke County. I speak not on behalf of the Foothills Conservancy, but as a member of the Foothills Conservancy. 68,000 acres have been protected and placed under easement, conservation easement, or under the state or federal protection, and has created part of the pristine waters you guys are referring to. As a member of the Foothills Conservancy in these decades, never was it ever discussed that we would protect the water of Charlotte. Rather, the water of the state of all peoples is what has been protected. And therefore, diverting the water to secondary purpose and changing it, transforming it, confuses me as a member of the Conservancy and what we have done and the victories that have been gained at great personal sacrifice and cost from the people of this region who respect environment, they try to guard environment, they try to persevere over hardship like what has been described. In urban areas tend to be hungry for resources and they tend to swallow it up. There is only so much that we can do up here to compensate for that hunger. You know, the allocation as it stands has been, I consider, quite generous. And now the urban growth of Charlotte now asks for it to be doubled, okay? I don't know that our area could ever meet that. Nowhere in these slides am I seeing any reference to global warming, to climate change. We are confronting that ourselves, and we're describing that in some detail. That's not going to get better. I can bet cash money on that, and I bet you guys can too. And that leaves us in a quandary. You have hunger and needs, and we may not be able to answer those. What then shall we do? And what people, I think, are describing is curb the appetite and the need for it because we cannot answer it. That in the Foothills Conservancy, I think, they will maintain and they will try to preserve the quality of those waters, the protection of endangered species. If there weren't endangered species involved, the clean water grants would not have been obtained from the Fed. We couldn't have obtained the goal of the 68,000 acres. So there is obvious need and obvious endangerment to compromising the toehold. From my point of view, at best, in the Foothills Conservancy, it is becoming unclear, what am I protecting? Because now you're changing the watershed. Now you're changing the definition of what is Catawba and what is not Catawba, what has been claimed and transformed and transferred. And I find that confusing. The conservancies are critical to the identity and to the preservation of the watershed across the state. And I hope that you guys will move in the interest of preserving from the watershed at the top of the mountain down to the sea, and to step back from your own needs and evaluate that. And we would be there, I think, to work with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate those comments. We are very familiar with the Conservancy folks and would expect that both the Foothills and the Catawba Lands Conservancy folks would be important stakeholders in our stakeholder engagement process. Charlotte is familiar as part of our engagement with the Catawba Water Management Group. We've helped sponsor land conservation through that group in both the Foothills and the Catawba areas. So we appreciate those comments and agree wholeheartedly with a lot of your comments about land conservation and its benefits to the source basin.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kim Van Sickler, and my husband and I actually moved here from Charlotte 3 years ago to get away from the uncontrolled growth that we saw happening there. There really is a lack of infrastructure, roadways, et cetera, and we didn't want to be a part of that anymore, so we moved out here and thought we were getting away from all that. I did want to, I was hoping you could pull that slide up again that shows the different interbasin transfer requests over the past decade.
Okay. Harold, I think that's in yours, correct?
That's right. Yes, the one with the 9.
Slide 9?
No, no, no. It's, oh, you can pass.
Oh, I passed it, okay. That one?
No, one more.
No, it lists the,
Keep going.
yeah, there we go, that one. So the towns of Cary and Apex, so that's the Raleigh area.
Correct.
And so looking at that as you were going through your presentation, I noticed that, Raleigh is, it's the state capital and it has like a larger population than Charlotte even has, although who knows how much longer it's going to stay that way. But my question is, do you happen to know if they are requesting, if the Raleigh area is requesting, so I mean, it looks like in 2015, they thought that, basically the amount or the IBT certificate that we currently have, they thought in 2015 that would suffice for them. Do you happen to know if they are also looking at increasing?
No. That one was provided by the EMC in 2015, and they looked out to 2045, 30 years.
Okay.
And your question about Raleigh, no. Yeah. Raleigh has not requested an IBT.
Okay. So out of all of North Carolina, it's Charlotte. Charlotte is the one that is requesting, basically, it sounds like doubling the amount of water that would be used over the next, we currently have about the most. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to double it, then doesn't that take us so far away from what every other jurisdiction is able to do with their water?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but over the 30 years, only 9 requested IBT. That does not mean that system does not transfer water. For instance, the city of Durham has an existing transfer of almost 50 million gallons a day because they built the system before the statute was in place. And they can transfer without getting a certificate up to 50 MGD. So it sounds like your question you're trying to ask.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like how Charlotte and their request figures with other jurisdictions and the growth that they are experiencing? Because Raleigh also is growing.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm going to try to narrow this down. Charlotte, their IBT would be reflected of the Catawba and the Rocky River. That's the context I think you should put it in. So how will their withdrawal affect people in the Catawba, as everyone hears from, generally from the Catawba, or the Rocky? Raleigh would be the Neuse, and Cary would be the Cape Fear. So it would be totally different to look at the impacts on that. The Environmental Management Commission would have to look at it by basin by basin. Is that a little bit clearer? No?
Yeah, I guess. Just trying to wrap my head around what North Carolina in general is doing to deal with population growth, because I mean, it's here, it's Charlotte, it's Raleigh, it's Durham.
Okay. Well, to answer that question, it's a bigger issue. Interbasin transfer is a very small amount of water management in North Carolina. The real issue would be the population growth throughout North Carolina and the water withdrawal and the demands. That's why the General Assembly in 1989 established the Local Water Supply Planning Program, where all units of local governments and large community water systems are required to do a 50-year plan. It's on our website, the North Carolina Division of Water Resources website, under the Water Supply Planning branch that I supervise. If you look there, you'll see all the water systems and look and see all of their growth 50 years out. To me, that's a better question or a better view for you, looking at the bigger picture of water resources management in the state, not just interbasin transfer. Because interbasin transfer, these numbers are small compared to how much water all the systems are withdrawing, all the energy, all the agriculture, all the recreation. This is only a small subset of water resources planning.
Okay, and then also you're going to be considering, you've heard people tonight talk about how they've seen in their lifetime here the water level go down and the changes. It sounds like there will be studies done to look at exactly what the people in the audience have been talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then, yeah, go ahead.
And climate change as well is a part of this. So we do believe in that. And also the ecosystem as well. All of that. And the process is further down. And I understood what the gentleman said about this is premature, but this is part of the statute. We have to notify people of the process without the facts. And that's what's causing this.
Yeah. Right. And the one thing that Charlotte is doing is we're not going out and modeling the Catawba watery system on our own. We're relying on the Catawba Water Management Group's model. They are updating that. There's a 10-year requirement by the Supreme Court settlement. We're not trying to promote a competing model. We want there to be, because we're a partner, we're a founding member, we believe in the philosophy, the logic, the planning aspect of that group, and we want there to be one model for the Catawba Watery Basin. It's already accepted by the state as the model for planning purposes for the state. And so we've been waiting to initiate any type of process so that the Catawba Watery gets ahead of us in their modeling efforts, so that we will have the details, the answers to the questions. It will go through an analysis that includes climate change, so many degrees per decade over 50 years. It will go through lake level requirements. It takes into account Duke's reservoir operations. It will tell you what the impacts for each reservoir is on the hottest day of the year and the highest demand day of the year, which includes a lot of evaporative effects. And so we believe that model will be the resource to answer a lot of the questions we've heard tonight. We're just not there yet. And we would encourage folks to pay attention to the stakeholder engagement process. We've talked about those being publicly available, and communicate with your local utilities. A lot of those here in this area, Morganton included, is a member of the Water Management Group. And so I would engage with them, if you do nothing else, to make sure you know how they're planning for this community and its growth and its needs, along with Charlotte and others.
Okay, so at some point, this will all be worked out. There will be a recommendation made. Let's say the recommendation is made to increase the transfer. Is there a process in place for, let's say, because of climate change, because the world is changing, is there a process in place to like backtrack on that, to cancel it in the future? If it goes into effect and then things change dramatically, is there a way that we can, just annul it?
Yes. On my presentation, you remember the slide, Angela, if you could find the slide, EMC decision consideration, they can, flat out deny it.
Well, I'm saying after it's approved. If it's approved.
Yes, they can reopen the.
They can reopen it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Angie?
Okay, it is 7:51, so I saw 1, 2, and then 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
If you'd like to make comments, please, if you would make your way to the microphone. We do have a time stop here in the room, here coming up soon.
Yes, and again, it's 7:51. We'll take these 4, and again, there is opportunity to also submit questions and comments electronically. Sir?
James Harris from Morganton. Could you roll back to the first or second slide of what this gentleman on the right was showing us?
First or second?
First or second.
First or
there
second.
we go. Hold on. Back one. Yes. IBT, yes. I'm looking at the second word there, which is telling what a transfer is. I want to thank the gentleman on the right for being straight with us that a transfer is a withdrawal.
Yes.
In contrary to the statements made before that a transfer is not a withdrawal. All right. Charlotte Water said this. The greater Charlotte region has seen high growth over the past decade that is expected to continue at a significant rate. Charlotte Water is committed to ensuring the community it serves has a reliable water supply that maintains pace with this development and meets the water demands into the future. Charlotte Water has it backwards. Growth cannot dictate the amount of the water supply. Water supply must dictate the acceptable level of growth. The amount of growth is controllable. The total water supply is not. And I'm making most of these comments to the gentleman on the right because you guys are going to be the decision makers. And the entire attitude towards how we handle water has got to change that way. The CWWMG master plan states the following. Previous studies have indicated that by mid-century, the safe yield for many of the basin's reservoirs will be exhausted. This water supply limitation makes continued population and economic growth beyond that point unsustainable. The requests have to be in line with what can be supplied, and I don't think any of us should be happy with it may run out in mid-century. I would hope that when this request is considered, we're looking at making sure we have adequate supply through the end of the century. And that means the Charlotte metropolitan area planners need to cure their addiction to growth and reverse their model to one of adaptability and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Sir?
My name's Peter Dahl, and I'm from Startown. And I only have a couple of questions. I understand the idea of the transfer, that you can't, because it's across the ridge, you can't pump it all back into the Catawba. So if this IBT is granted, how long before Charlotte decides that they got to have more water from the Catawba, which then they've got to pump across the other side again to the Rocky, because they're not controlling, they're not managing. It's not about controlling growth. At this point, it's about managing growth. So you've got to manage the growth. If they're all going to the east side and putting it all in the Rocky, maybe they got to bring the stuff back this way. Keep the water kind of where it's supposed to be. Because if you keep pumping it over to the Rocky, sooner or later somebody downstream below Charlotte doesn't have doodly. Next question, and this is my final one. Has Charlotte determined a point when water withdrawals and transfers impinge on the entire system and screw the thing up so badly that it doesn't work anymore? There's no water at the top and there's no water at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, sir, not to try and answer all your questions, but that Catawba watery model that I'm talking about is the model of the system that includes some of the details that you're asking about, how much transfer is too much, and then how much withdrawal is too much for the system. So that model will be the indicator of when that time is and where that time is. It will predict in what decade water levels are too low for critical reservoir levels due to climate change as well as withdrawal amounts. So that's the model that I would pay attention to answer some of your questions.
Okay, but does anybody have the political will to stop something before we get to the point where we're getting ready to tip over to that? That's another question, and that's the part that the city has to, that's the big part that the city has to do. And by the way, I don't get to water my yard because I'm on a well. So all the people in Charlotte that water their grass in the rain, which I've seen because I worked there for 10 years, I don't get to water my yard.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening. My name is Donnie Potter, County Commissioner in Caldwell County. First of all, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come and present the information. I've not had a chance to come to one of these meetings. I've missed the other ones. But I had a question that was brought to my attention, is that you guys are following state statute, which you talked about earlier, and that's what these public meetings are a part of that process.
Right.
It's my understanding that the study that you guys are required to do is weighted towards the impact on the receiving basin, meaning the Rocky River, and does not consider the long-term effects of the contributing basin. It only considers the data that's submitted by the applicant, and anyone who is opposed to that, that data is not, that evidence is not to be submitted, or is not to be considered, I should say. Is that the fact? Is that true?
That's not true. Turn to the factors. Yes, the source and the receiving basin. Yep, no, that's it. Okay. She was right there. Yes. So it does consider the source and the receiving basins, and it does, the study itself looks at all the components that falls under those 9 factors that the Environmental Management Commission will consider.
So it does consider the impact up the river?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying that. I will say that I do want to go on the record. My job as county commissioner to represent the citizens of Caldwell County, and we oppose this. We're not supportive of this. And several people have spoke about this, but at some point in time, you guys with Charlotte Water need to go back to your city council and talk to them and push back on them about the growth that you're seeing. Your growth is outrunning your infrastructure, and it shouldn't be the responsibility of people in western North Carolina and South Carolina in the Catawba River Basin That burden shouldn't, your burden should not be put on our backs. You have your own problems. You need to solve your own problems. And you have alternative methods to look at that. And that's something that you've got to do, because I don't think you come to any of these meetings expecting for us to be excited about giving you water. We don't have enough water today to handle the growth we have, but we're managing our growth. Western North Carolina is doing a much better job at managing their growth than you guys are. So my thing to you is go back and talk to your city council, explain to them that at some point, we have to stop growing. And I know that's hard to do, but I know that your city is growing way too fast. Several people have talked about that. So my question to you is, what are you doing to help your own infrastructure? My water department comes to me and tells me all the time when we have problems. They'll tell us, they come to us, they give us feedback, and we listen to them. So hopefully you can go back to your city council and explain to them that, hey, we can't keep putting this burden on the backs of these other cities and towns and states. So again, thank you for being here and thank you for listening, and I hope you'll take this back. And I know Charlotte Water, I know you want this, but I'm hoping that this gentleman with DEQ will take into consideration these comments this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
8 o'clock. One more question?
Yes, this is the last question here. Okay, and then,
Sorry?
and then Scott, okay.
Good evening. My name is Donald Duncan, Caldwell County Manager. I've been through a few interbasin transfers, most notably the most recent one with Concord, Kannapolis. And I do have to contradict you. I know the legislation says that you have to consider it, but the only way to submit data from the contributing basin is to file suit. I've been at the EMC meetings. We were actually turned down. We could not submit our studies. They were refused at the prior hearings. So the only way that happened is when the state of South Carolina enjoined with a lawsuit, and we were able to then submit that data. That is not part of the legislation right now. You cannot receive data other than from the applicant, or if you order a study from your own staff. So that's not the case. I've seen that, I've been there. We tried to submit the data. It was refused until we submitted the lawsuit at the prior one at Concord, Kannapolis. The other thing I'd like to ask for Charlotte Water is this. What is your water loss rate? You're the director, you should know that. That's not a question you'll have to get back to us on. I know my water loss rate. I know the water loss rate for many of the towns in here. What's your water loss rate?
It's between 15 and 20.
It's a little higher than that based on the television testimony that was given.
Okay, and when was that?
So that was May 9th.
Okay.
There was an interview that was done with your other deputy director for WCNC Charlotte on their Where's the Money episode.
Okay.
So most people are operating, now the goal is to 20%. That was always been the magic number that the state's told us for years. Most people are operating in the single digits in this area. If you go to the city of Morganton, you go to city of Lenore, Sawmills, Conover, where I was the former manager, we were in single digits because water loss is the quickest way to mitigate water.
Absolutely.
Evaporation does happen. So before you ask for additional water, you need to get your own system in order. Now, I say that, you have a large system, we know that, but what is your total deficit that you're running? This is also part of that testimony that was given on TV, live. What's your water, what are your loss rate, and then how much money are you losing every year annually? It's on YouTube, you can Google it, you can watch it right now.
Okay, all right.
Even your own city council members didn't know the number in May.
Okay, sir, and any additional comments?
No, this is a question you should know. You're the director. It's about 221 million estimated. So what did you finish the year at? The end of your fiscal year, June 30th. We gave a report to our commissioners just last week what our June 30th ending balance was. What was yours for the water division?
And we can certainly, and I can certainly get that to you.
So how much?
You know, it sounds like it's an attempt to try to
I'm not here for a gotcha moment. I'm here asking.
Yeah, it's coming across that way. You know, we're here to listen and get your comments. Yes, there was a story that was done. I don't know how long ago it was. I don't have that
You
information
had your
in
largest
front of.
water rate increase proposal in the history of the city at one given year, this year, correct?
Absolutely. Not the largest. Not the largest.
That was how it was
And more
advertised.
recent,
Yeah, that-
actually, we've had years where we had one in July and one in January.
Correct,
So it was
correct.
not the largest rate increase.
That was advertised, that was what the headline was, it was the largest water rate
Well, you can't
increase.
always believe what's on the
I understand.
headline. Our data is out there for anyone.
So you're operating at a net loss of about 221 million is what was advertised.
That's not
No,
correct.
it's not correct. A 221 million deficit?
Correct, that's
No,
what was
sir.
advertised as the reduced capital you had to do.
Yeah,
60 million estimated for this current year,
Yeah.
or the year that just ended.
no.
Yeah,
So you-
that one reporter's information
Yeah.
was not
It's-
accurate. We tried our best to
Yeah.
get him accurate information. He chose to report what
Right.
he thought he should. Our finances
online.
are public information. You're welcome
Correct.
to look at them.
Yeah, and the budget is.
Our CAFR will be out in October, which is an audited financial report, and everybody's welcome to see that.
Yeah,
We don't operate at any kind of deficit anywhere, not even a tenth of that. We don't operate
Yeah.
at a deficit at all.
Sure. I guess the point being here is, if your financial constraints, it looks like you're putting the burden on growth to overcome the financial constraints, and then that growth comes at our expense.
The growth to us is not, we are a cost recovery system.
Yes.
We do not,
Right.
growth is more cost to us that we have to recover.
Right.
New meters are just another cost that has to be recovered through the rates and fees. And so we don't generate excess revenue because we're growing. We generate excess cost that has to be covered by the revenues required.
Sure, you have to operate an enterprise fund, we're all aware of that.
Exactly.
But what we're saying is that the reporters have looked at your books, they have reported on that. There's no contradictory information out there at this time. This has been reported since May 9th. First time it's been reported on anything is what you just said here. That's my question is why is that still lingering out there? Why did two council members say we haven't seen the information in the report?
Yeah, we can't speak on
Yeah.
behalf of the council
Yeah.
members. And again, we met with the reporter 2 or 3
Sure.
times before he decided to share his information, and he picked what he thought he needed to report.
right. And just because it's out there does not mean it's true.
Okay, thank you.
Last
question.
All right, thank you. Ms. Charles, Mr. Hargrove, Mr. Peel, thank you tonight for presenting this information. As a former Charlotte Water employee for 24 years, a former city councilman, now the Director of Water Resources for the city of Monroe. We are doing a 3 million gallon per day wastewater plant expansion to the cost of now $147 million. Started out at about $70 million 2 years ago. This is the start of a new wastewater plant that will basically, the old system, which is right next door, basically together, will come offline once the phase 2 and phase 3 is complete. When the phase 2 is constructed and the phase 3, I have concerns because up to a certain amount, this first phase will take our wastewater treatment plant to 13.4 MGD. We're a regional provider for most of Houston, Union County, all of Monroe, and all of Eastern Union County. When we go to 13.4, when we go to expand and do the additional phase 2, which could add an additional 3 to 6 MGD, depending on what the need is at that time, your request could potentially place significant financial burdens on my utility. And that would be that we would have to model, we discharge into Richardson Creek, which is part of the Rocky River Basin. In doing so would place significant financial burdens on us in the future to have to model the river basin. That's very, very expensive to do so. In addition to that, it could place other financial costs on plant expansion, advanced treatment technologies, and it is all that we can do right now to swing $147 million for 3 million gallons of expansion. And so We're looking to go to construction early 2026. The cost could be 200 million at that point. We don't know. So my question mainly to Mr. Peel, do you foresee this costing us additional money in the future to have to model the Rocky River Basin, the Yadkin PD Basin, because it's going to be a significant cost to my utility and the citizens of Monroe and Union County?
Well, I don't know the details, but it sounds like you had looked into it and you think you're looking at a future expansion. So, I mean, I would have to see the information before we could make and talk with the NPS group.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't make that. I'm in planning side.
Yeah, I understand.
So what I'll offer you, Scott, is the Yadkin PD through Union County's IBT request was modeled per the state required modeling application. So the water quantity information is already present, and it's being updated by the Yadkin PD Water Management Group.
Okay.
The Rocky River Basin is being studied. There's a partnership developed that you might want to become involved with. I don't know that it includes Richardson Creek. I know that it should include an input from Richardson Creek, but Monroe probably could be a partner to have the creek and the assimilative capacity studied along with the overall Rocky River effort. Charlotte's participating in that.
Okay.
Because the DO concentrations in that receiving body was fully allocated. And
Yes.
so DEQ did not have capacity to allocate additional plant expansions. And so if you like more information, I can share with you some details about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, it's 8:12, and that concludes the meeting again. Charlotte Water IBT. Oh, we have one more? Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Coffey. I'm from Burke County. I just have a couple of questions and hope I don't offend anybody. I appreciate y'all coming out and bearing with us the way you have. My first question is, if you take the water from here and draw it down, will Charlotte be willing to compensate us for the water drop in our rivers and basins and come out and build new boat ramps so that we can reach the water when it recedes so far out past the boat dock that we're falling off the end of the boat ramps with our boats? And my second question is, right now, from the Wildlife Association, if you put your boat in Lake Roadheads and you pull your boat out, you are, I don't know how to say it, you have to take your boat and wash it and clean the hull to get all the contaminants from that lake off before you ever take it to another lake and put it in. And if you put it in another lake and pull out, you have to go clean the bottom of the hull. Are you worried about contamination from dam to dam to dam to dam to dam to reach Charlotte from pulling that hard on us, the contaminants that would follow down? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We are concerned about contaminants, just like the folks here in the Morganton Hickory area, and we are, through the Catawba Watery, are pooling our resources to try to do more monitoring of the system, as well as figure out a way to have more source water protection, things like you were describing there.
Okay, sir, and this will be our
I've just got a couple
last
of things I
question.
want to
Yes,
ask.
sir.
You manage your budget, you spend the amount of money you got. Okay, if you spend over that, you're going to go bankrupt. Okay, you're doing the same thing with your water resource. If you don't manage it right, what's going to happen then? And what you're doing now is just like you're doing the same thing that you done in the Rocky River Basin. You're jumping over now and you're going to get the Catawba River Basin.
You overextended yourself in it. Now you're going to overextend yourself in the Catawba River Basin. Who's next? If you can't manage your water sources, you need to cut down on your growth. Instead of going out here and trying to pull in more growth, you need to learn to manage your growth. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you. So again, charlottewaterIBT.org is the one repository. Any additional comments can also be sent to ibdprojects@charlottenc.gov. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Meeting is adjourned.